There is exactly one place in the United States where alligators and crocodiles live in the same water, and it is here. That's the normal part. Florida also has a full-grown deer that stands about as tall as a kitchen counter. A rabbit officially named after the man who published Playboy because his company paid for the research. A panther population that got saved by importing cougars from Texas. Ants that gather inside air conditioners in numbers large enough to short them out. Two species of termite that had never once interbred anywhere on Earth until they met in a Fort Lauderdale suburb. And a herd of bison on a prairie. In Alachua County, that's 6 more. There are 43, and they get stranger. Some of what's coming lives nowhere else on the planet, and the first 6 are the clearest version of that. Fact 1. South Florida is the only place on Earth where American alligators and American crocodiles share the same water. And there's a reason it works out here. Crocodiles range across a dozen countries from Mexico to Brazil. Alligators live only in the United States. The only spot those two ranges can cross is the crocodile's northern edge, and that edge sits inside the Everglades. The two species barely compete once they're there. Alligators hold the fresh water. Crocodiles work the brackish edges, out toward Florida Bay and the coastline near a nuclear plant called Turkey Point, a name worth remembering. They're not fighting over the same water so much as trading places at the line where fresh meets salt. Fact 2. Florida holds the only sawfish population left in the country. The smalltooth sawfish once ranged from the Carolinas through Texas to Brazil. Today, it survives in real numbers only between Charlotte Harbor and the Keys. Florida's Wildlife Commission puts its maximum length at 18 feet, longer than a minivan, with a flat blade of a snout carrying 21 to 30 teeth per side that never grow back once lost. That snout isn't just a weapon. It's wired with sensors that pick up the faint electrical current coming off a fish's own body, so a sawfish can find dinner in water too murky to see through. In 2003, it became the first marine fish ever placed on the federal endangered list. Fact 3. That deer from the cold open is the key deer, and the comparison holds up down to the inch. Bucks stand just under 3 feet at the shoulder and weigh around 80 pounds. Does run 24 to 28 inches and about 65 pounds, close to a third the size of a mainland whitetail buck. The subspecies is packed onto roughly 26 islands from Big Pine Key to Sugarloaf, most of them on Big Pine and No Name. 700 to 800 exist today, every one a full-grown breeding adult, browsing in front yards at about the height of your kitchen counter. Fact 4. The rabbit has a scientific name that reads like a prank, and it isn't one. Silvolagus palustris hefneri. James Lazell described the subspecies in the Journal of Mammalogy in 1984, after Playboy Corporation helped fund the fieldwork, and named it for Hugh Hefner in return. It survives only in marsh patches across a handful of the lower keys, mainly Big Pine and Boca Chica. Estimates run in the low hundreds, one of the rarest mammals in the United States. Biologists can't count them directly, since a rabbit in dense marsh grass is nearly impossible to see, so they count droppings instead. A survey after Hurricane Irma found those counts down 94% across the sampling plots. Not a slow decline over decades. One storm, nearly erasing an animal most Floridians have never heard of. Fact 5 takes a few minutes, because it's the first of 2 stories here where a specific group of people made a specific decision on a specific date. By the late 1980s, the Florida panther had been squeezed down to somewhere between 20 and 30 animals, all of them in the swamp and scrub around Collier County and Big Cypress. That's not a struggling population. That's a family tree with nowhere left to branch. Every panther alive traced back to the same shrinking pool of parents and the state's biologists could see what that was doing to the animals. Kinked tails, generation after generation. Cowlicks spreading through the fur. Holes in the heart turning up on necropsy after necropsy. In males, undescended testicles and sperm counts so poor that much of the population wasn't breeding well even when it tried. A population viability study run in 1992 put the panther on track for extinction within 24 to 63 years if nothing changed. So something changed. In 1994, what's now the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission sat down with geneticists, the National Park Service, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the fix they designed is strange enough to say plainly. Bring in cougars from Texas and let them breed with the last wild panthers in Florida. Not a random pick off a map. Mitochondrial DNA testing showed Texas cougars were the closest living match to what Florida's population looked like before it collapsed, because the two groups had exchanged genes historically, before hunting and land clearing cut that connection off. In 1995, biologists released 8 female Texas pumas into South Florida panther habitat. 5 of the 8 bred successfully with wild male panthers, and the kittens told the story on their own. Kinked tails grew less common. Cowlicks became rarer. Heart defects dropped, and sperm quality climbed back toward normal across the following generations. By 2003, once the genetic mixing had done its job, biologists removed the last 2 surviving Texas lineage cougars on purpose, ending the experiment on a schedule rather than letting it run. A study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences later confirmed what the field data suggested. The rescue reduced the inbreeding damage without swamping the original Florida panther's genetics underneath it. The population backs that up. From a low of 20 to 30 animals, the joint estimate from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and FWC now puts adult and subadult panthers south of the Caloosahatchee, between 120 and 230, more than 4 times where the species started. They still live inside a narrow strip of Collier County, Big Cypress, and Everglades National Park, and the leading cause of death today isn't inbreeding. It's vehicle strikes, 24 in 2024 alone, the worst year for that cause since 2016. But the population that nearly blinked out from its own genetics is still walking around because a group of biologists decided, on purpose, to drive 8 cougars in from Texas. Fact 6. The Florida bonneted bat is the rarest bat in North America, and it lives nowhere outside the southern end of this state. Nobody has ever run a full census on it. Bat Conservation International puts the entire population in the low hundreds, possibly under 1,000 animals total, roosting in family groups of about a dozen inside tree cavities and the occasional bat house. It's Florida's largest bat, with a wingspan pushing 20 inches and ears fused at the base into a bonnet. It didn't get federal endangered protection until November of 2013, for the same reason as the panther. Not enough animals, not enough range, and no room left to lose any more of either. Every animal so far was born on this peninsula and had nowhere else to go. The next batch showed up from somewhere else entirely, and Florida never got around to sending them back. Fact 7. Nobody knows how many Burmese pythons live in the Everglades, and the U.S. Geological Survey says so outright, calling its own conservative estimate tens of thousands across terrain too dense to survey. What isn't in question is what they did to the mammals down there. A study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences compared road surveys from the mid-90s against surveys a decade later, once pythons had spread through Everglades National Park. Raccoon sightings dropped 99.3%, opossums 98.9%, bobcats fell 87.5%, and marsh rabbits and foxes came close to vanishing from the routes entirely, in a park where all of them used to be common. Fact 8. The story everyone repeats is that Hurricane Andrew blew open a snake breeding facility in 1992, and that's where the python problem started. Only half holds up. Andrew really did destroy an exotic animal facility south of Miami, and inspectors reported thousands of escaped specimens loose afterward. But pythons were already being sighted in the Everglades through the 80s, before Andrew made landfall. The storm added snakes to a population already established through the pet trade. One contributing event, not the origin story. Fact 9. Florida runs an annual public hunt for these snakes called the Florida Python Challenge. The 2026 event drew 907 hunters from 30 states, plus Canada and Vietnam, and removed 280 pythons in 10 days. A small dent against tens of thousands. But it stacks up. FWC and water management contractors have pulled more than 19,000 pythons out of South Florida since 2017. The heaviest on record, from Big Cypress, weighed 215 pounds, ran nearly 18 feet, and carried 122 developing eggs. Fact 10. Green iguanas go into a cold-induced shutdown once temperatures drop into the 30s and 40s, losing muscle control and dropping straight out of the trees. Florida's Wildlife Commission issues genuine falling iguana alerts during hard freezes. In one 2-day cold snap, the agency collected 5,195 iguanas statewide, the Sunrise office alone taking in more than 1,000 in a day. They're not dead. They're stiff on the ground until the sun comes back and their muscles start working again, which is why FWC once waived its own removal permit to let residents pick them up off the sidewalk. Hold on to the cold. It comes back later for something much larger. Fact 11. Iguanas are established along both coasts now, and their burrowing undermines seawalls, sidewalks, canal banks, and foundations wherever they dig in. Because of that damage, Florida allows them to be captured and humanely killed year-round without a permit on 32 public properties in the south of the state. One of the few animals residents are told to remove on site rather than report and wait. Fact 12. The Argentine black and white tegu is a 4-foot lizard with 4 established breeding populations in Florida. Miami-Dade has logged more sightings than any county in the United States, 8,342, as of July 2026. Second place is St. Lucie County with 1,981. Miami-Dade has more than 4 times the tegu reports of anywhere else in the country. Fact 13. Camera traps at monitored alligator nests recorded tegus stealing up to 2 eggs a day until the whole clutch was gone. A University of Florida study of the stomach contents of 93 tegus found something harder to watch. Hatchling gopher tortoises, a species Florida already lists as threatened, showing up as a regular part of the diet alongside fruit, bird eggs, and pet food left outdoors. They raid American crocodile nests too, which is going to matter later. Fact 14. Cane toads run 4 to 6 inches on average, the largest ever measured at 9.4. Glands on their shoulders secrete a milky toxin strong enough to stop a dog's heart within 30 to 60 minutes, if the dog mouths one. They trace back to roughly 100 toads released near Miami International Airport in the 1950s, and have spread as far north as Tampa, adapting to suburban yards along the way. Fact 15. In the 1930s, a boat tour operator known as Colonel Toohey released about 6 rhesus macaques onto a small island in the Silver River to give his glass-bottom boat tours something extra for passengers to look at. The monkeys turned out to be strong swimmers, left the island within days, and scattered into the forest. Toohey released a second batch around 1948. The popular story that they were put there for a Tarzan film crew is folklore. University of Florida researchers found the monkeys already living wild at Silver Springs before that crew arrived, and no macaques appear in the finished movie. Fact 16. That original handful has grown into a wild population of at least 300 along the Silver River, projected to keep growing around 11% a year if left alone. A study published through the Centers for Disease Control found roughly a quarter to a third of the monkeys sampled carried antibodies for herpes B, a virus that almost never crosses into humans, but can be fatal when it does. Florida State Parks doesn't allow visitors to approach or feed them. Fact 17. Lionfish. First showed up in Florida waters in 1985, almost certainly from aquarium releases. In the western Atlantic, they have no significant natural predators, so nothing here works against them while they eat through native reef fish. Volunteer divers push back where they can. A single derby in the Keys this year pulled 2,480 lionfish off local reefs in 2 days, a record, and organizers estimated that weekend prevented nearly 1.5 million acts of predation. 11 facts, 6 animals, and every one of them was put here by somebody. The next 9 are animals you already recognize: squirrels, ants, ducks, a tortoise, doing something they have no business doing. Fact 18. Alachua County River State Park, south of Sop Choppy in the Panhandle, has a resident population of white squirrels, and the park manager describes them as something visitors see nearly every day. They're not albinos. It's a condition called leucism, a loss of pigment that leaves the dark eyes intact, sometimes with gray patches left over. The colony has been there since at least the 1950s, long enough that a captive group was later founded at the Tallahassee Museum, from squirrels caught in the same woods. Fact 19. Florida's native fox squirrels run noticeably bigger than the gray squirrels most Americans grow up watching in the backyard. The big cypress and southern fox squirrels reach 27 inches and 3 pounds, nearly double a typical eastern gray, which tops out around 1.5 pounds. They range from the Panhandle down through Big Cypress. The difference is obvious the moment one shows up next to a normal squirrel at a feeder. Fact 20. Those air conditioner ants from the cold open have a name, and the way they kill a unit is almost mechanical in how well it works against itself. One ant touches a live contact and gets shocked. Dying, it releases an alarm pheromone. That pheromone draws more ants to the exact same spot, and those get shocked too, releasing more, pulling in still more behind them. Before long, a pile of dead ant bodies bridges the contact and shorts it out completely, whether that contact sits inside a home air conditioner, a fuse box, or a pump. They're called tawny crazy ants, and they're established across 27 Florida counties. Fact 21. 2 of the most destructive termite species on Earth had never once been recorded interbreeding anywhere on the planet. Then they found each other in Fort Lauderdale. University of Florida entomologist Thomas Chauvanc noticed the Formosan and Asian subterranean termites courting roughly a decade before he collected the first confirmed winged hybrids in 2021. Hybrid swarms have appeared every year since, and in October of 2024, researchers found a living hybrid colony in a tree inside of Fort Lauderdale Park, not just stray swarmers on a warm night. Chauvanc calls it a real concern because nobody knows what traits the combination can produce. The same pairing has since turned up in Taiwan, which suggests it will happen anywhere the 2 species meet. Fact 22. The bison live at Payne's Prairie Preserve State Park, just outside Gainesville. 10 were trucked in from the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge in Oklahoma in 1975, part of an effort to restore the prairie closer to what it was before settlement. The herd now runs 50 to 70 head, sharing that open prairie with feral cracker horses, descendants of Spanish colonial stock loose there for generations. Fact 23. Muscovy ducks sit inside a rule that sounds contradictory until you read the documents behind it. Property owners can legally kill them under a federal control order that strips the species of Migratory Bird Treaty Act protection everywhere outside 3 named Texas counties. At the same time, Florida Statute 379.231 makes it illegal to relocate or release one. Officials worry about disease and interbreeding with native waterfowl. So the birds can be removed, but nobody, not even a state agency, may move one to a new pond. Fact 24. Coyotes are not native to Florida, and their spread followed a chain of cause and effect, rather than just happening. As the native red wolf was hunted out of the state, it left an open niche, and coyotes moved in, first documented in the Panhandle by the 1970s. Until 1981, their southernmost confirmed extent was Polk County. By the late 90s, they'd reached 65 of the state's 67 counties, and the final 2 weren't confirmed until 2013, closing a colonization that took 5 decades across a state coyotes had never lived in. Fact 25. Somewhere under a Florida sandhill, there is a tunnel 40 feet long and 10 feet deep, and more than 350 species use it. Burrowing owls, indigo snakes, gopher frogs, riding out fire, drought, and cold snaps inside it. All of it was dug by a gopher tortoise, an animal with a shell the size of a large dinner plate, smaller than a beach cooler. It dug the tunnel for itself and never bothered to lock the door. Fact 26. Virginia opossums carry a peptide in their blood that neutralizes pit viper venom, letting them prey on copperheads and cottonmouths, both common here, without much real risk. Their body temperature also runs cooler than most mammals, 94 to 97 degrees, which makes an opossum a poor host for rabies specifically. They can still catch it. They just do so far less often than the raccoons and foxes in the same neighborhoods. Remember the opossum. It turns up again at the very end of this list, and it does not win. 9 animals nobody would call exotic, every one of them doing something that doesn't fit. What comes next keeps that going and moves it into concrete and steel. Fact 27 is the second story that gets a few minutes, and it starts with an animal, not a building. Picture a female American crocodile working a shallow bank at the edge of brackish water, digging a mound nest with her hind legs, checking it through the incubation season, staying close once the hatchlings break free. That's ordinary crocodile behavior. The same routine the species has followed for millions of years. In the continental United States, she can only do that at the southern tip of Florida, the very edge of a range that otherwise runs down through Mexico and the Caribbean. And one of the largest stretches of exactly the right nesting water in that entire range sits around a place most people know for one thing. It's called Turkey Point, and it's a nuclear power plant. Turkey Point sits on the coast south of Miami, and when it was built, engineers needed a way to pull heat away from the reactors without dumping hot water straight into Biscayne Bay. Their answer was a network of cooling canals, roughly 168 miles of them laced through raised earthen banks, close to the driving distance from the plant to Key West and back. It was built to circulate and cool water. Nobody in that design was thinking about crocodiles. But shallow, brackish water with soft, sun-warmed banks is exactly what a nesting crocodile looks for. And they found the canals, moved in, and started digging nests into the banks between the reactors and the bay. By 2019, reporting based on Associated Press coverage put the number of crocodiles among the Turkey Point canals at several hundred. The site held around a quarter of every American crocodile then living in the United States, At the time, roughly 2,000 of them. That's not an accident engineers stumbled into and left alone. Florida Power and Light employs wildlife specialists who have run a monitoring program there for decades, measuring, tagging, and relocating hatchlings as needed. They treat an endangered reptile's nesting ground as a working part of the plant's operations, right alongside the reactors. And remember the Tegus raiding crocodile nests. This is the ground they're raiding. Go back to the first fact on this list. Alligators hold the fresh water. Crocodiles work the brackish edges. Turkey Point's canals are brackish, engineered, and now the nesting ground a quarter of a species this country nearly lost depends on. It's the second time here that a species survived because people decided, on purpose, to manage it that way. The same choice that saved the panther, just made by a utility company instead of a wildlife agency, using cooling canals instead of cougars. If that's the kind of thing you want more of, Florida's infrastructure is full of it, and this channel exists to go find it. Subscribe to Florida Empire. Fact 28. Manatees carry almost no insulating body fat, which makes them oddly fragile for an animal the size of a small car. Once water drops below about 68 degrees, a manatee starts suffering cold stress, a slow breakdown of the gut and immune system that can kill it over days or weeks. That's the cold from the iguanas, running the same play on a 2,000-pound animal nobody can pick up off the sidewalk. Fact 29. Before the mid-20th century, manatees survived Florida winters by retreating to natural springs that hold a steady 72 degrees year-round. Once power plants started discharging warm, cooling water along the coast, manatees found those outfalls too. A peer-reviewed survey across more than a decade of winters found 48.5% of the state's manatees now wintering at power plant outfalls, 17.5% at springs, and most of the rest in deep dredged canals holding residual warmth. That survival pattern did not exist before utilities started building generating stations on the coast. Fact 30. Nesting 130 feet up a cell tower ought to be worse for a bird than nesting in a tree. A 5-year study of osprey nests in Pinellas County, one of the most built-up counties in the state, tracked both and found no meaningful difference in how many chicks survived. Duke Energy has since built 9 osprey platforms across the county, plus dozens of deterrents on poles where a nest would actually cause a problem. Fact 31. In Brevard County, a pair of ospreys built their nest on top of a traffic signal pole at Stadium Parkway and Vera Boulevard. Because ospreys are federally protected, the nest could not simply be knocked down. Moving it to a dedicated pole nearby took both state and federal permitting, which is how a bird generated a paperwork file at 2 levels of government for picking the wrong intersection. Fact 32. The Caloosahatchee, the river running from Lake Okeechobee out to Fort Myers, was channelized and locked for boat traffic and flood control starting in the late 1800s, then straightened again by the Army Corps of Engineers in the early 60s. A study out of Mote Marine Laboratory found something nobody set out to look for: bull sharks being born and spending their first months inside that engineered channel, umbilical scars and all. They travel roughly 26 miles upstream before hitting the Franklin Locks, a structure finished in 1966 for boats and saltwater intrusion control that, as a side effect nobody designed for, stops young bull sharks from going further. Fact 33. Wood storks hunt by touch rather than sight, sweeping an open bill through shallow water and snapping shut on contact in about 25 milliseconds. What they need is water 2 to 15 inches deep, calm, clear of vegetation, ideally dropping so the fish concentrate. A mowed roadside ditch satisfies every one of those conditions which is why federal habitat guidance for the species lists seasonally flooded roadside and agricultural ditches as legitimate foraging habitat, alongside tidal creeks and cypress sloughs. The ditch was dug to move water off a road. The bird reads it as a feeding ground. Fact 34. At the Royal Palm area of Everglades National Park, home to the Anhinga Trail, black vultures strip rubber and vinyl straight off parked cars, going after wiper blades and window seals. The National Park Service says outright, there's no good explanation for it, since the birds have plenty of carrion nearby and don't need the calories. It gets worse in winter when vulture numbers peak, and rangers now hand out loaner tarp covers and bungee cords so visitors can cover their cars before heading out on the trail. Fact 35. Monk parakeets build their nests onto live utility equipment more often than in trees. One South Florida study found 60% of nests on energized substations and transformers, 20% on other man-made structures, and only 20% in trees. When rain-soaked sticks bridge a live contact, the result is an outage. One documented stretch of parakeet outages cost roughly $585,000 and cut power to more than 21,000 customers. The birds build the nests. The utility pays to clean up after them. 9 stories about animals and the things we built, each one a single creature finding a single structure and making it work. What's left leans a different way, where the scale itself is the strange part. Fact 36. Every winter, black-tip sharks gather so close to shore in Palm Beach County that beachgoers can watch them from the sand without getting in the water. Researchers at Florida Atlantic University ran 58 aerial survey flights across 4 winters and counted 104,255 sharks. A single day at the peak turned up 12,128 in roughly 6 square miles of water. A migration most Floridians drive straight past, visible the whole time from a beach chair. Fact 37. Roughly 10,000 Gulf sturgeon migrate up the Suwannee River every spring and summer, some topping 8 feet and 200 pounds. And they jump, clearing 7 feet of open air before coming back down. Nobody has proven why. Communication, buoyancy control, and shedding parasites are the leading theories. None confirmed. What is confirmed is that boaters get hit. Florida's Wildlife Commission documented 9 people injured by direct strikes in 2006 and 9 more in 2007, and a 5-year-old girl was killed by a jumping sturgeon in 2015, the only fatality of its kind on record for the river. It's why the agency issues a sturgeon advisory every spring. Fact 38. Florida has the rarest bat in North America, a few hundred animals total. It also has this. The University of Florida's bat houses in Gainesville hold an estimated 450,000 to 500,000 bats, the largest occupied bat houses anywhere in the world. The original went up in March of 1991, funded by the Athletic Association after a 1987 fire in Johnson Hall displaced the colony, living in its eaves. The bats didn't move in until 1995, and the university has kept adding capacity since, with a second bat barn finished in 2017. Fact 39. 9 out of every 10 loggerhead nests in the entire Northwest Atlantic are laid on Florida sand. The state's index beaches, 27 shorelines covering about 30% of Florida's beach length, recorded just over 71,000 nests in 2023, the highest on record for that survey. And those beaches are only about half of statewide nesting. Fact 40. Florida has more than 80 documented species of mosquito, according to the University of Florida's Extension Program, and the list isn't finished. 10 new non-native species have turned up since the year 2000, which works out to roughly 1 new mosquito every 2.5 years, arriving faster than anyone can name the ones already here. Big numbers are easy to admire from a distance. The last three are different because these are the ones people around here have stories about. Fact 41. A single infested acre of Florida ground can produce up to 97,000 new fire ant queens a year, per University of Florida research. Dense multi-queen colonies run more than 200 mounds to the acre, each capable of a coordinated sting response that leaves a ring of white pustules by morning. State and federal control has cost well over $250 million. And the ants keep spreading anyway, one flooded mound and one queen flight at a time. Fact 42. Love bugs are not, despite what most Floridians will tell you with total confidence, an accident created inside a University of Florida lab. UF entomologist Norm Lepla has said plainly that they arrived on their own from the Yucatan just after World War II. The first confirmed Florida report came out of Escambia County in 1949, and the population spread across the Gulf Coast from that one point. The lab story gets repeated so often it starts to sound like research. It isn't. It's a rumor that outlived the truth it replaced. Fact 43. The eastern lubber grasshopper is the largest grasshopper in North America, 3.5 inches long, and it doesn't fly. It walks, slowly, dressed in bright yellow, black, and orange that works as a warning label. It eats toxic plants and stores those toxins under its own exoskeleton, and it hisses and sprays a foul-smelling fluid when handled, in case the color scheme alone doesn't land fast enough. And the animal from earlier that shrugs off rattlesnake venom and mostly ignores rabies. An opossum that eats a lubber throws it back up like everything else. South Florida is still the only place on Earth where an alligator and a crocodile share the same water. And by now, that isn't even the strangest thing here, sharing space with something it shouldn't. This state runs on the same trick everywhere you look. Ordinary rules bent just enough to hold something impossible. Subscribe to Florida Empire, and the next stretch of Florida gets explained the same way. One bent rule at a time.